Okay, well, we'll get going. You can leave. We got three. You always have a choice in life. All right, we will call this a special meeting of the Ripon City Council, September 26th, to order. Is there any public discussion on items that are not on the agenda? No, we don't have any online. So with that, we will go into item number 1, discussions on accessory dwelling units. Ken, give us the details.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, fellow council members. Go ahead and put that. Got a short PowerPoint, and I also gave you guys a handout. Should be in front of you there to follow that if you'd like. All right. Well, there we go. Essentially, the city of Ripon's local control has been significantly reduced since the state started preempting local zoning ordinances in 2016 for accessory dwelling units. In 2016, the state of California passed Assembly Bill 2299 and Senate Bill 1069 with the intent of increasing California's housing supply by making it easier for property owners to build ADUs on their lots. In short, the legislative intent was to promote housing diversity and affordability by removing local obstacles and ensuring that ADUs construction would be easier, faster, and more widely permitted across the state. Prior to 2016, the city didn't see many ADUs developed in town. However, since 2016 to current, there have been 56 ADU applications approved through the planning department. 56. 56. Yeah. Since 2016, California has passed new laws almost every year, essentially eroding local control little by little each year. The purpose behind California passing new laws almost every year has been to attempt to address the state's severe housing shortage by removing barriers, streamlining approvals, and expanding opportunities for homeowners and developers to build ADUs. Thus, in the state's opinion, increases affordable and flexible housing stock statewide. The state's ultimate goal is to maximize ADU construction as one of California's most practical solutions for increasing affordable housing and meeting growing housing demands. In 2016, there were 3 bills that were passed that took effect in January of 2017. The passage of these laws is often viewed as the launching of the ADU revolution in California. This 2017 reform package is what cracked open the door for the ADU boom that has currently been happening because it eliminated the most common local roadblocks and forced cities to comply. The key requirements of those 2 bills were they required amending local ordinances. There was a requirement that from the state that cities and counties adopt ordinances to be in line with state ADU law. If a local jurisdiction did not amend their ordinance to be consistent with the law, then the state law itself governed. And they also required ministerial approval, required local governments to approve ADUs ministerially. At that time, 120 days with no public hearings and no discretionary review. So that had to be done at staff level. Also with that bill, those bills, parking reforms were ushered in. It limited parking to no more than 1 space per unit or bedroom, whichever was less, and prohibited parking requirements if the ADU met certain requirements, such as half mile of a public transit stop, designated historic districts, part of an existing primary residence or existing accessory structure, or where on-street parking permits are required but not offered to the ADU occupant. If you look at the city's current map of our transit stops, there's not a whole lot of areas of Ripon that do not fall within this half mile distance of a public transit stop. So pretty much is inclusive of almost all of Ripon city limits of where they would be exempt from having any parking requirements for ADUs. Furthermore, the law prohibited local agencies from requiring a new utility connection or capacity charge for ADUs created within an existing residence or an accessory structure, like a garage conversion. And it did allow connection or capacity fees for detached new construction ADUs, but they had to be reasonable and proportionate. For example, if an ADU is detached or attached to the primary unit and is under 750 square feet, the city can only charge connection and capacity fees that are proportionate to the primary unit. If it was being converted and it was under 750 square feet, the city cannot charge any connection or capacity fees. And then ADUs above 750 square feet were subject to all the impact fees for the city of Ripon, but they do have to be proportionate to the main dwelling on the lot. Basically, there were some setback rules for conversion. ADUs at that time, they prohibited local agencies from requiring setbacks for ADUs created within existing structures. So if there was a garage unit, per se, in the old part of town that was on the property line, we did have to allow that to be converted without requiring the required 4-foot setback for a new ADU construction. They did have some size and development standards. They confirmed that local agencies could still impose standards at that time in 2016, such as height, setbacks, parking, but those standards could not unreasonably burden the construction of ADUs. And then they had the establishment of JADUs created within the footprint of an existing single-family home. A JADU is a junior accessory dwelling unit, so it has to be 500 square feet or less. It had to be established within the walls of the existing single-family home. It had a requirement for a kitchen, but it can be an efficiency kitchen, so it didn't have to be an oven or anything like that. It could be like a hot pad or something like that that they could cook food with, microwave. They did some bathroom options there. You could either have their own bathroom or they could share a bathroom with the main dwelling unit, with the junior accessory dwelling unit. And they had an owner occupancy requirement. So if you had a junior accessory dwelling unit, the owner had to live on the property, either in the unit or the primary dwelling itself. And then the parking, we could not require any additional parking for JADUs, or we could not charge any connection or capacity fees for JADUs. In 2016, they also came up with what is called a state exempt ADU. So a state exempt ADU had certain requirements, couldn't be over 800 square feet, height limit of 16 feet, side and rear setbacks of 4 feet. And then local jurisdictions cannot impose certain development standards such as minimum lot sizes or open space requirements that would prevent the construction of a state exempt ADU. A lot of laws that were in 2016. 2017 rolls along, and 2 more bills were passed that took effect in January of 2018. The key requirements of those were special districts. They were also subject to restrictions on utility connections or capacity charges. It doesn't affect Ripon per se, but this is part of those bills. Specified that ADUs can be built in conjunction with proposed single-family homes, not only added later. So prior to that, a lot of jurisdictions would not let you put an ADU up until the single-family home was completed. However, this bill ushered in that you could build them at the same time. Max established a 1,200 square foot maximum size for attached ADUs. So an attached ADU could not exceed 1,200 square feet if it was attached to the main house. And then also had some further parking clarifications. It further limited local government's ability to require parking. It had more waivers allowed, such as tandem parking. So you could park in front of or behind cars for the main unit. And it also allowed parking in setback areas. So like in the front yard area where some of the front yard could be, you could actually resurface some of that area and have an area for parking for the ADU. And then ADU zones. It ensured that ADUs are allowed within all zones that permitted single-family residential uses. So instead of just being single-family or residential zoned properties, in 2017 they ushered in that they had to be allowed where the city's allowed houses, even if it was by a use permit. So if you go to our downtown district or our mixed-use districts, they allow housing with a use permit. So if there was a single-family home allowed in those properties, we had to allow ADUs within those zones as well if they had a single-family home. 2018, the state relaxed a little bit, didn't have any new laws they introduced at that time. But in 2019, they were back at it. 2019, they introduced 4 bills that were passed in that time. That took effect in January of 2020. These set of bills created a new category or added restrictions to the new category for state exempt units. These laws were designed to streamline ADU approval, expand eligibility, and limit local barriers. AB 68 was passed that year, and it legalized junior accessory dwelling units up to 500 square feet, basically created entirely within the home. Permitted 2 ADUs per lot, 1 detached and 1 JADU. Allowed conversion of existing structures in ADUs with no setbacks required for the structures being converted. Reduced ministerial approval from 120 days to 60 days. So when an application is received by the planning department, we had 60 days to respond and review those applications instead of the previous 120 days. It prohibited minimum lot sizes. Local jurisdictions apparently were imposing minimum lot sizes where ADUs could be built. It basically removed those requirements, making it easier for homeowners to build on smaller lots. And it set a maximum size limit, 850 square feet for 1 bedroom and 1,000 square feet for multi-bedroom ADUs. It allowed multiple ADUs on multifamily lots. So if there was a multifamily project, you could add multiple ADUs. And it clarified that ADUs were not subject to density limits. So a lot of our residential areas, we have density requirements. They cannot exceed lot coverages. ADUs do not count towards those. SB 13 also enacted that year, further limited impact fees for ADUs under 750 square feet and provided a 5-year window to legalize unpermitted ADUs. And Assembly Bill 881 was introduced as well. It prohibited minimum square footage requirements. So ADUs had to meet, they couldn't put minimum size requirements on it. So ADUs have to meet what the state calls an efficiency unit. Efficiency unit at this time is 150 square feet. That's the minimum size they believe that housing unit should be. And so that's kind of the minimum set by the state. A city could not adopt something in contrary to that. It clarified that garages can be converted into ADUs without the requirement for replacement parking. And it eliminated the owner occupancy requirement. So prior to 2016, prior to the city adopting the latest ordinance, the ADU requirements or the ordinance for the city of Ripon required that the owner live on the property, in either the ADU or the primary dwelling unit. 2019 Assembly Bill 881 prohibited that or eliminated that owner occupancy requirement for a time period of January 1st, 2020 to January 1st, 2025. So any ADUs built in that time frame did not have to have owner occupancy requirements, which opened the door for developers and other owners to buy properties and add an ADU and have 2 rentals in on that property. 2021, 2 more bills were passed, taken in effect in January 1st of 2022. It allowed local agencies to permit the separate sale of ADUs if they desired. Ripon to this date has not. The ordinance does not allow for this provision, but there are certain jurisdictions that do offer that for ADUs where they can be sold separately than the primary dwelling. And those bills also does not allow HOAs or CC&Rs to restrict the creation of ADUs within their developments. Let's see, we're getting closer to the end here of all the bills that were introduced. 2022, 2 more bills were introduced, taking effect in January 2023. Senate Bill 897 basically required local agencies to impose only objective standards on ADUs which involve no personal or subjective judgment by a public official. So for design guidelines or criteria, they had to be very subjective. or objective standards, not subjective standards, on the design criteria. They did adjust some of the height limits. 16 foot still remains as the main height limit for accessory dwelling units, but they did allow some provisions. They allowed up to 18-foot height limit for ADUs within a half mile of a public transit stop, or if the property already has a 2-story multifamily dwelling on it. And additionally, they allowed for a 25-foot height limit for ADUs if it was attached to the primary dwelling, subject to the underlying zone. So that, for instance, our residential zoning districts cap height limitations at 35 feet for 2-story homes. So obviously, this if it was a little bit more restrictive, that would come into play on this. But the 25-foot height limit for ADUs being attached applies in this instance, since our code is a little bit higher. And then they still were tweaking a little bit with parking standards. They prohibited local agencies from imposing parking standards on an ADU that was included in an application to create a new single-family dwelling or a new multifamily dwelling on the same lot. We couldn't require additional parking, off-street parking requirements for new ADUs being built with new single-family homes. And Assembly Bill 2221 established that a city cannot preclude the construction of an ADU with front setbacks, aiming to reduce arbitrary decisions at the local level that blocked ADUs. So if a property is restricted from having at least an 800 square foot state exempt ADU on the property because a front setback or even a street side setback would preclude that, we have to waive some of those or reduce some of those setback requirements so they can at least fit a state exempt ADU on the property. It also prohibited local agencies from denying ADU applications due to non-conforming zoning conditions, building code violations, or unpermitted structures that do not pose a safety risk. And then they just did some more clarification on the time frame for approvals, reaffirming the 60-day time frame. 2023, a couple more bills were passed that took effect January of 2024. At that time, the Assembly Bill permanently removed the owner occupancy requirement for properties with ADUs. So that sunset clause of January 1st, 2025 is no longer in place. So ADUs on properties can be on any property now, and there's no owner occupancy requirement. And then AB 1033 just reinforced the allowance for local agencies to permit the separate sale. And it required cities and counties to develop programs by January 1st, 2025 to post pre-approved ADU plans on their website, further streamlining the approval process for homeowners. And then lastly, this last year, there was quite a few. Looks like, what do we got here? 7 different bills that were passed, aiming to take effect January of 2025. Some of this covered the mandated that all California cities must have that pre-approved ADU plan scheme in place. Increase the number of ADUs allowed on multifamily properties from 2 up to 8 units, depending on the number of existing multifamily units. Prohibits local governments from requiring the replacement of surface parking spaces when existing is repurposed for ADUs. This is on multifamily properties. It expanded the amnesty program for legalizing unpermitted ADUs, basically providing an easier upgrade process and just focusing more on health and safety requirements in unpermitted ADUs and reducing or eliminating penalties or fines. It did require the cities have an amnesty program in place for these unpermitted ADUs. They also improved the ADU permitting process in the coastal zones, which is not anything to do with us, but apparently there was a lot of long delays in some of these coastal areas, so they passed some legislation to help that process. They did also pass a bill that eliminated the owner occupancy for junior accessory dwelling units if they meet certain criteria. So now junior accessory dwelling units doesn't have to have owner occupancy on the property if they meet certain requirements or restrictions. And they ushered in some new streamlining inspection processes to speed up kind of the approval process and also the inspection process for ADUs with the intent of getting more housing in place quicker. And then they did pass a bill prohibiting HOA fees for ADUs. A lot of HOAs would charge like design review fees and fees for ADUs to be built within projects that had HOAs. They prohibited those fees from being charged. And then lastly, they eliminated the provision of local architectural review for state exempt ADUs. So in the past, we were always able to make sure that the ADU being built was complementary or matched the existing house that was on the parcel as far as material, roof type, roof material and everything. If it meets the state exempt requirement, we can't look at any of the architectural design or compatibility of these units. So moving forward, the last ADU ordinance for the city of Ripon was adopted in May of 2021. Since that time, the state has passed numerous additional bills, 13 to be exact, essentially every year making it difficult to keep the city's ordinance and staff processing up to date to meet these new ever-changing state requirements. ADU ordinances are required by law to be compliant with state law. If a local jurisdiction's ADU is out of compliance with state law, it is considered null and void, and state ADU law trump. State ADU law is much more lenient and encourages development of ADUs and JADUs to a greater extent than does Ripon's ADU ordinance. Therefore, it's imperative that the city adopt their own ADU ordinance in an effort to maintain as much local control over the development of these units as possible within the city of Ripon. While it seems to that every year the state continues to erode local control regarding ADUs, there are still some areas that staff believes can assist the city of Ripon in maintaining the quality and character of our existing residential neighborhoods. The difference has really come down to what is state exempt, what the state is defining as state exempt ADUs, which are heavily mandated and controlled by state law, and non-exempt ADUs, which local jurisdictions still retain local discretion. Local jurisdictions in California can adopt different standards for non-exempt ADUs as long as they do not conflict with state law for state-exempt ADUs. So some of the areas that staff is looking a little bit for some direction from City Council would be the following here. Setbacks for non-exempt ADUs. Staff believes should align with the city's detached accessory structures standards for setback requirements. So if you were to build a detached garage on your property or a workshop, there would be a minimum of 10 feet rear property line setback and 5 feet from the side property line. For non-exempt units, the staff is recommending that we would adopt those same setbacks for a non-exempt ADU. Height restrictions for non-exempt ADUs, we believe, should also align with the city's requirement for detached accessory structures. The state, as you see, allows up to 16 feet pretty much across the board, 18 feet in some instances, and also up to 25 feet in others. If we followed our accessory structure standards, that would limit the overall height to no taller than 12 feet. Design guidelines for non-exempt ADUs should have design guidelines requiring the ADU to match or complement the primary residence in roof pitch, siding, colors, materials, etc. on those. So we believe that the non-exempt units should have to follow those guidelines. And then also lot coverages, just like somebody building a detached garage or a shop or a pool house on their lot, we believe non-exempt ADUs should have to count towards lot coverage requirements for each of the zoning districts. Parking requirements, non-exempt ADUs are non-exempt, are not exempt from parking requirements if an ADU converts required covered parking for a residential property. The requirement for covered parking shall be replaced somewhere else on the property, and the non-exempt ADU shall be required to provide at least one off-street parking space. So we believe that if they are gonna build a non-exempt ADU, they should have to meet the parking requirements and or replace the parking that they took away from the primary residence if it's a non-exempt ADU, state ADU. And regardless of new construction or conversion, non-exempt ADU shall pay development impact fees proportionate to the main unit on the property. And lastly, non-exempt ADUs shall require owner occupancy on the property. So these are all kind of staff's thoughts and suggestions for non-exempt ADUs. I believe that's kind of one of the only areas that we still have a little bit of local control. So with that, that's all I've got. I know there's a lot of information there, but be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Kenny, you explained this to me yesterday, but I didn't quite understand it. Can you describe again how one is allowed to build an exempt, state exempt ADU versus a non-exempt ADU?
So state ADU law mandates that a single-family property has the ability to build a state exempt ADU. So we cannot have restrictions or requirements in place that would prevent that. State exempt ADU is something that's a detached ADU that is 800 square feet or less on the property. Has to maintain a 4-foot side and rear property setback. There's also some front setbacks that we required in our code that it meets the primary unit, but if a property does not have the ability to build an 800 square foot ADU, we have to reduce setback requirements and such to be able to allow at least an 800 square foot ADU on the property.
Can they do multiple or just one single family?
Just one detached. There can also be one, according to state law, one attached state exempt ADU, which is limited to 50% of the main unit or 1,200 square feet. So if
you could take a single family residence that meets those requirements and turn it into basically a 3-family.
Yeah.
Three unit property.
Okay, and then also for my benefit, describe what would be the rules around building a non-exempt ADU.
Well, and that's what we're trying to flush out a little bit here, what the council's desires are on that. If non-exempt ADU is something that would be larger than the 800 square feet, right now, the way our code is written, currently written, it would still meet the 4-foot side and rear setbacks. We're proposing that if it's considered a non-exempt, they meet a little bit stricter requirements like we have for our detached accessory structures, is what I've been kind of proposed at the end there to see if that's what council would like to move forward with.
Okay, so to simplify it for me, if it's under 800 square feet, it is going to be an exempt ADU, is that correct?
Yeah, state exempt, yep. And just to be very clear on that, is most of our ADUs out of the 50-some that we've seen developed here in town, I'd say 99% of them would qualify as state exempt. Most of them are under the 750 square foot requirement because that eliminates the imposition of all the development fees on a proportionate share versus just like a connection or capacity fee.
Every single one. I mean, you can put development standards all you want, which I think we should have. Make it as, I mean, I guess I look at it as this town is special. It's unique. We have development standards for a reason, and the state is insane and taking all of the control. And just because the state allows you to do these things doesn't mean you should, particularly in this town. And it gets very frustrating when the state just continues to erode control. You can build whatever the heck you want, however it looks, wherever you want. We build utilities that serve these things. Why do we even have standards? The state can build whatever you want, wherever you want. It doesn't matter. It's so frustrating. But I don't know. I would, there's nothing we can do. You want to build 800 square foot or less, go do it.
So I don't disagree with that, but I have a question. So that was a lot of information. I'm trying to picture in my mind all this stuff you're trying to tell us. What are the setbacks? The minimum required
So
setback?
minimum required setback, that's kind of a slippery slope here for that. Normally, 4 feet off the side property line, 4 feet off the rear property line. You could build a detached accessory dwelling unit, or even an attached dwelling unit that could be within 4 feet of the side and rear property lines. If the imposition of those setbacks or a front yard setback or a side yard setback would not allow someone to build at least an 800 square foot ADU, then we would have to relax or reduce those setbacks so they could build at least an 800 square foot ADU on the property.
So much for telling
If you had
somebody
a
not to go
small,
back.
single-family lot that only had enough room to build a 600 square foot, but they wanted to build an 800 square foot, they could build up to the lot line, basically, if that's what was required to make it happen.
Right. There's not a lot of lots here in town at
Most
this
of them are
point that
small
would
enough to-
be that small where you couldn't fit an 800 square foot ADU, at least meeting the 4 foot side and rear setbacks.
Right.
Here's why I'm asking, because I bought several properties side by side that I still own, and the fence was too close to the property. The insurance company wasn't gonna insure the property, because I had to move the fence over to make enough room, and I'm wondering if people realize if they do this, they may have some insurance issues.
Yeah, I don't know what the state law is on insurance on any of that.
What's the insurance companies? It's
Yeah.
not-
Yeah, and that would just be the responsibility of the property owner. I mean,
No, I get
As
that,
far as-
but they need to know what they're getting into. That's all I'm saying.
of course.
Hey, maybe they'll stop building them if one burns down and they can't afford to rebuild it.
Yeah.
I think what you said earlier was you could build one exempt detached and one exempt attached. Is that the limit?
That's stuff that we're still kind of working through in our ordinance. I believe that is the limit. I'll defer to,
Yeah, yeah, we would have that fleshed out and obviously in the ordinance as we would update it. But my interpretation is that in the scenario that you're calling out, the attached unit would be called a junior accessory dwelling unit. And the law is pretty clear, not 100% clear, but it's pretty clear that you are allowed one ADU and one junior ADU or JADU
What?
per lot. And so that attached unit would be considered a junior unit because it's attached.
Okay. Now I'm confused.
I apologize.
No, I know.
This is very technical,
I
so
thought that he said that on a lot, you could have one exempt detached, which would be an 800 square foot or less, and one attached exempt, which could be 1,200 square feet. So is that, if I had, let's say I have a lot that's big enough, and I have a 2,500 square foot house, I could attach 1,200 square feet of living space to that 2,500 square foot house and build an 799 foot detached unit, and that would all be okay.
that's where Tommy and I have been trying to, basically as we get this thing in front of the planning commission, city council, that's kind of one of our final points that we're still trying to clarify on, going through state law on that. But
Okay.
my interpretation of it or reading through it, that's kind of what I got out of it. But I think our discussions, Tommy and I need to kind of go through that a little bit more.
Okay, then I got it.
Yeah.
Now I got the real question I was gonna ask. I got all that done. I got room for another 800 square foot detached unit. Can I do that?
no,
So I'm limited to those two additions.
that's correct.
Okay.
But if
that's-
you've got a,
Yes.
if you've got a,
In a single family lot.
if it's a,
Multifamilies are a different story,
Right.
but we're talking
Right,
about
no,
single family in
I
this discussion.
understand.
But
I
yeah,
understand. Okay.
yeah, and you know, in addition to, you know, existing home, and more than likely the exterior is gonna look the same. It's gonna look like an add-on to a house. I mean, that's probably not as big a deal, but when you have no requirements, you can look like whatever you want, and you just go slap it in there and make it as cheap and simple as you can build it. Doesn't match the look of the neighborhood, and we work hard to make a nice neighborhood, and someone
Yeah,
goes
I
and
know,
slaps them
I'm
up
telling you,
everywhere.
I've seen some dump.
Just makes no sense, but there's
before
nothing you can do about it
requirements.
when there's less than 800 square foot, so,
So you get a dump.
yeah. You turn the town into a dump.
And Leo, your lot's big enough to put an apartment building on, so you're limited.
No, this is, these ADU laws, that the multitude that have been passed, there is essentially zero consideration for, particularly for towns like ours. These are going to change the character of the neighborhood, without a doubt. One of the things that we all know is, it's not a one-to-one correlation, but it's a very close correlation to that, which is when the street is filled with cars parked on the street, that neighborhood, it loses value. Those homes lose value. It's a parking lot out there. And then people start parking in their front yards. I mean, you add 2,000 square feet to your 2,500 square foot home, as Leo described. What do you got? Another 3 cars? At least. No architectural review of these. Man,
Well, Gary, you're familiar with Palo Alto. You end up being like Palo Alto, where on garbage day, they actually don't let you park on the street so the garbage truck can pick up the parking. You see people out there scrambling around, moving their car, moving it back. So that created a different issue.
but
And just to clarify, so there's been a distinction that's been made between exempt ADUs and non-exempt ADUs. Those are specific categories that the state has made with specific criteria that the applicant would have to meet. But the state has given us very limited discretion to still regulate those non-exempt ADUs, and so that would be the crux of what we would be working through. And then the state exempt ADUs would be something that would be obviously processed ministerially and wouldn't really have much discretion. So there's still remnants of control, but it's very little.
yeah,
that
well,
the
as,
state is
as the mayor
affording.
pointed out, 99% of these things are going to be in the exempt category. So
You're
That-
looking at building a 900 square foot one, just build an 800 square foot one, you don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
Why would you do that? So, I make the rules as
that said,
good as you can. for
every
everyone.
category that you described, I appreciate, and I think all of those should be part of our city ordinances around these non-exempt ADUs.
Different. One of the, how should I put it? Controlling factors that you mentioned was if it's a single-family lot or a multifamily lot. Do we have any multifamily lots in this town?
We do. You're talking, I think multifamily is defined as triplex or 2 or more. Yeah, it's been, we do have multifamily lots though in town.
Okay. Is that determined when the development occurs? In
That
other
is,
words,
well,
if I
obviously,
had my lot, can I come into you and say, I want to convert my single-family lot to a multifamily lot?
you could come in and try to convert a single family lot into a triplex or a duplex. That would be a discretionary approval process that goes in front of the planning commission. So you could, if you had success in rezoning your single family property to a multifamily property, then that opens up a door for you to, put a few more of these units on the multifamily property.
But the city has the ability to decide yay or nay in that instance.
In that instance, when you're actually trying to convert from a single family to a multifamily lot, but once it's to a multifamily lot, then you just fall back to the standards for ADU law that ADUs would have to.
Okay. How about like an apartment complex, has some extra room sitting around parking, they can go build whatever they want there too?
They can, there's some limitations on it. I'm not 100% up to speed on those. We don't have a ton of multifamily lots looking to do this.
Yeah, but if someone was to come in and buy an apartment complex and say, hey, we got all this extra parking, or we'll build 8 more lots on this thing because we can.
You're right. And there's also some provisions in some of these laws that have passed where they can even take up parking spaces and use those for ADUs in these multifamily lots,
Or
and we
they
don't have
build it
any
over top of the parking. and build
discretion
parking.
on that.
Yeah.
So,
What are the setbacks from the street?
well, that's a good discussion point. We've, in our ordinance, have kept it at the same setback as the primary unit. However, if it's gonna prohibit an ADU, state exempt ADU from being placed on a property because of size or constraints or limitations, then we would have to relax those. So they could fit it.
To what distance? Do you have any idea what the state
Whatever
requires?
would allow an 800 square foot unit. So. Could be
I'm just
zero.
saying,
I
you can
mean,
sit these things sitting on the sidewalk almost.
could be if that's the only spot you could actually fit an 800 square foot unit. Yeah, we would have to relax those requirements.
Build an ADU in front of your house.
Can you?
Make your
That
front.
would apply to attached unit. I could take my 400 square foot garage and convert it into a 1,200 square foot ADA coming out to the sidewalk and all the way back to the back of the lot.
We would only have to allow, the city would only have to allow up to an 800 square foot state exempt ADU. So if you wanted to go above and beyond that, obviously you'd have to meet different setback
So
requirements.
you could tell me I can't build an attached ADU, I have to build a detached.
You can do an attached ADU. You could do an attached ADU. That's what kind of the gray category of where Tommy and I are trying to work through some of that. He's thinking it's a JADU, which is 500 square feet. I'm reading it differently, so we're going to vet that out. If it's going to prevent you from creating a state exempt ADU, we do have to relax some of those requirements if it's going to prevent it. So the state law says if you can't build up to an 800 square foot detached ADU, meeting certain setback requirements that we have in place, like the front and street side per se, the other ones are 4 feet and 4 feet. We would have to relax some of those. So like a corner lot in town, you could possibly build it on the street side area, which we would require no structures be built. It could be built over there if that's the only place you can do an 800 square foot ADU.
I want to build, one of the state exempt ADUs is a 1,200 foot attached. Right? What I just heard you say was if my 1,200 square foot attached ADU is gonna create setback problems, you can tell me, Leo, you're not gonna build that one. We'll let you build the 800.
And that's the area we're still working through on that. I
Okay.
mean, there's 20 bills over the last 7 years that have been passed that have been making this moving target
Yeah.
a little more difficult to muddle through.
Yeah, that and HCD or the Housing Department of Housing and Community Development are good friends. They've published guidelines as well that further complicate this. They have a handbook about that thick that further fleshes out some of these things. And there's even legal debate amongst city attorneys about whether those guidelines that are adopted by non-lawyers are the correct implementation of the law. So it's been a moving target. It's very technical. And so there's been a lot of confusion that's not just unique to the folks up here on the dais. It's statewide. There's a lot of people still working out what this all means.
in Leo live, we have ordinances that were set by the builder back in the, remember Leo, that?
Yeah, CCNRs.
CCNR.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Those are out the window.
Doesn't matter.
You can't have CCNRs or HOAs that would prevent the construction of an ADU, a state exempt ADU, I should say. So after, obviously getting some direction, hopefully from council today on the direction, I guess, for the non-exempt, so we can kind of maybe polish up and finish up our ordinance. It would go to planning commission for their review. At some point, they would review that, make a recommendation to city council. Obviously, you guys would review it and either adopt it, amend it, make some changes if you see fit. And then once we do a final adoption on an updated ordinance, we do have to send that into HCD. They review it. And so they could send it back and say, you guys missed the point on these things and we don't think you're compliant with state or the state law on it. And so we might be back at the table again. So to just kind of put a bow on this thing and wrap it up, I mean, I think we're, first part of this next year would be probably the soonest we'd be getting through the council process, and then we send it to HCD. I don't know how fast they would turn it around, but we could be dealing with this into 2026, trying to get something that's fully compliant.
Well, it's next year.
If there's ability to control it, make it as nice as possible.
And I do want to just throw this out for just for a point for council. Although we don't have much say over design criteria or any say really over design criteria, anything like that for state exempt units, and most of our units we've seen built here in town are state exempt. What we've seen so far in town has been pretty decent looking units that the developers or homeowners or property owners have been putting in. So they do have an ability to kind of cheapen this thing up if they want to, but what we've seen so far to date here in town has been actually pretty decent looking units. But like I said, it's fully out of our control at this point.
I think for the most part, people are smart enough to figure out they can devalue the property if they do it wrong.
But if you're just looking for a rental property.
Be
I
okay,
don't think they
here's the
really
other
care.
part though. Mathematically, that don't make any sense unless it's a mother-in-law or family member. I've done the math. I can add a bunch of units on all my properties because this is mathematically, you never get an ROI out of it. So I think it'd be more for a family member, but some people would do it anyway and not get a good ROI, I guess.
And prior to like 2016, when the state really infused themselves into local ordinances and local planning, as far as ADUs, that's really what we saw because it had to be owner occupied, one of the units on the property. So, we were seeing these things for in-law quarters or, maybe college age kids or family members like that. And so I could literally count on one hand how many ADUs were built prior to 2016 probably. And then after that, it's been a big boom, at least here in Ripon as well as across the state.
That's not the intent of what the state's doing. The state's wants you to build more housing for renters. All right, any further discussion? Nope. Comments from the public? Sure.
Thank you, City Council. So somebody who's actually thought, Adam Corkins, 1588 Van Andel, somebody who's thought a lot about this ordinance, I might suggest we take a different view on where the city has control, which is what can you do to incentivize those higher standards? If you simply put too high a standard and burden on the non-exempt category, people are going to go to the exempt category. Saying that as somebody who tried to build and now is approved currently from planning and had to go there, I tried to build a garage, a unit above a garage. I tried to use a higher quality material on the roof with the intent of improving the property, and those got shot down because they didn't conform with the poorer construction of the property I acquired. So I would just encourage, think about this ordinance not just as how you can keep people from doing stuff. I think Councilman Restuccio said it right. As an investor, I'm not looking to devalue my property. I'm trying to make Ripon a better place, a place that people would come in. I am thinking as a renter, but I'm also thinking as a dad. I've got 5 kids that I'd like to be able to have affordable homes in this community rather than go somewhere else. So I think it's not just investment, it's also how do you create the ladders for people to get where we are now when they're 18 years old and facing the most unaffordable housing market in all of our lifetimes. right? The amount of money you have to make a payment on a purchase is hard. And the way I look at some of these laws is creating a ladder for young kids to actually get into better houses over time, right? We don't get there in one shot, we get there over time. So what does that housing stock look like? Where do we want that to be concentrated in our community so that our kids can grow up here and become a part of this community? So I would just encourage you guys, think about that. And I absolutely want this to continue to be a beautiful place. I'm not going to put one in my front yard on Van Andel, but there are parts of this town that need to be redeveloped, that need investment. And that's where we should be encouraging people to put money in and build affordable housing for our neighbors. It's not just about a check. It can be about our kids and our friends' kids who we want to grow up here as well. Thanks.
Good morning, City Council. My name is Ryan Van Groningen. After hearing the conversation, I'm actually an owner that has built several ADUs, and I think I'm more towards. I know I am part of the 99%. I would just urge you guys to actually go out and look at those ADUs, not just mine, but the 99%, because your guys' concerns, I believe, are very valid. But that is the 1%, which doesn't really make up what's actually being built, in my opinion, because it has been, of course, talking to neighbors originally, nobody wants them in their neighborhood. But once you actually do it and you talk to them, there hasn't been issues. They appreciate being able to. It's a smaller house for either one person, a couple. You know, they don't want to be in an apartment. They want to actually have their own little yard and everything like that. So I would just urge that I don't think the ADU concept in general is bad. It just needs to be done right, because it does provide definitely citizens of Ripon with some additional options when housing costs are what they are, and these ADUs are lower cost than what their other alternative is. So thank you for your time.
You know, Mr. Mayor, if I can make comment, that's a
Yeah,
good point. Can you give us a list of where, not names, but just a list of property locations where they're at? We can go take a look at them, because I'd be interested in looking at them. I may have been driving by some and never even known they were ADUs.
I can give you a good one to go look at. So, I mean, if there's 52 of them, there's at least one. So that the math is there's only maybe 98% that are good, not 99%. But you know, you know, it's great if there's people that care about the community and do a good job. I'm not concerned about the person that goes builds a really nice one. I'm concerned about the guy that just wants to as an investment to build the cheapest thing you can and turn the neighborhood into a dump, which there's no control over that, unfortunately. So if you guys may build fantastic ones, and that's great. But you know, the concern is the people who don't care about it so much.
Yeah, I think they all feel that way, but if you can give me that location, if you can get us a list too, I'd like to be able to at least drive by and take a look.
So like maybe 98.4%.
Give me the
are
one
good.
give me the one you got too, because I'm sure that's one you want me to look at.
Yeah, it is.
Kenny, you don't happen to have like a file of photos of these, do you, by any chance?
No, no,
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
And we can certainly provide a list to the council of locations of these so you can look at them. We have had like 56 approved. I would say that not all of them are built or got built. Some people, for whatever reason, I think when they started doing their due diligence on them, maybe backed off and didn't construct them. So, but we do have probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 some that we can provide addresses for to look at. And like I said, I think the ones that we have had built, like I said, they all pretty much meet the state exempt requirements, where we didn't have much ability for our architectural review, which was just actually removed very recently. But most of these units that were built or are built out there do look pretty nice. So like I said, I will provide that that list for you guys so you guys can check some of these out for yourself.
Nope. Okay, we're gonna go in closed session. So appreciate you guys coming and giving your
Thank you,
comments.
guys.
Thanks.
That's good.
Appreciate you coming.